Hello everyone and welcome to this session of programming with Java. In this session, we will continue our discussion on the selection statement and we will further see how can we perform the nested if-else and if-else-if ladder in Java. So nested if-else is used when we have certain set of condition which is in turn dependent upon some condition. So for example, if we take our previous condition of hungry, then previously we were checking that if we are hungry or not. So we used to write that hungry, and if hungry is true, then we were eating something, and if it is false, then we were sleeping. But let's say if we are hungry and we want to eat something, then we will check that if there is any food in the house or not. So if there is something to eat, let's say if there is any solid food to eat, then we will say eating solid food. But if there is nothing to eat, then we will go outside and buy some food. So we have this two condition, that if there is anything at home to eat or not, and if there is anything at home to eat, then we will eat at home, and if there is nothing to eat, then we will go outside and buy some food. But all of these condition will be executed or will have any relevance or significance when we are hungry at the first place. So if we are not hungry, we will just go back to sleeping. So these two conditions are further dependent upon this condition, that if we are hungry or not. So to implement these kinds of condition, we use the nested if conditions. So first we write the if keyword followed by the main condition, which is if we are hungry or not. So if we are hungry, then our program will check the further condition, that if there is something at home to eat or not. If there is something at home, that is condition 1 is evaluated to true, then we will execute the statement 1, that is eating the solid food. And if there is nothing at home to eat, then we will say that go outside and buy some food. Similarly, if the main condition is not true, that it is not get executed, then we will execute the statement 3, that is we will go back to sleeping. So to understand this in detail, let's look at a problem statement. Suppose we have to design a program that checks the marks of the student. If the student has passed the exam, then check if the marks scored in languages is greater than science or not. And if the student has failed the exam, then return the number of marks by which student has failed. So to implement this in Java, we first have to look at our approach. So our first condition is that if the student has passed the exam or not in the first place, that is the marks is greater than 50 or not. Now if the marks is greater than 50, then our program will check for two other conditions, that is if the marks scored in languages is greater than science or not, and if the marks scored in languages is less than science. Now if the marks scored in languages is greater than science, then our program will give an output that you scored more in languages. And similarly, if the marks scored in languages is less than science, then our program will give an output that you scored more in science. But all of this condition will only be executed when our marks is greater than 50 at the first place. And if the marks scored is not less than 50, then all of this program will never get executed, and our program just say, sorry, you failed. So let's head over to Java and see how can we implement this. So first we have to define a variable which will be of integer data type, and such that we can store marks in it. After it, we have to define our nested if-else conditions. So first we will define the main condition. So we will write the if keyword, and within the parentheses our first condition or the main condition, that is marks is greater than 50. Now if the marks is greater than 50, then we have to perform certain set of conditions. The first condition we are going to perform is that we have to check the marks scored in languages. So we have languages and science. So we have to also create two new variable such that we can store the marks scored by languages and the marks scored by science in them. Okay, now we have to define these two conditions within this if conditions itself. So we will write that if marks or languages is greater than science, then we have to perform certain condition, which are that we have to print at our screen. So we will use the println method. You passed and scored greater in languages. Let me expand it so we can see clearly. And if this condition is not true, so we will write else, and afterward the statement, that is system dot out dot println you scored more in science. We have to also write that you passed and you scored more in science, and we have to terminate these two statements with the semicolon sign so that we can use them. Now we have defined the dependent condition within this if condition, but all of this condition will be executed if this condition is true at the first place, and if this condition is not true, then we have to define certain other condition. So we have to define the else keyword else as well. So we will write else if the marks is not greater than 50, then we will just print at our output, that is system.out.println that sorry, take exam again, and we will terminate it by a semicolon sign. So this is how we have designed our program, and we just have to now give the marks, give the different values to our variables such as marks, languages and science. So let's give it values. Let's say marks scored is 55 and you scored, let's say, 17 languages and you scored 75 in science. Now if we will run this, we will get you passed and you scored more in science because you scored 75 in science and 70 in languages. So similarly, if let's say we reduce the marks to a value of 45, which is now clearly less than 50, so our system will just simply give sorry, take exam again. So we defined two conditions which in turn was dependent upon a main condition, and that is the student, if the student scores greater than 50 or not, and if the student simply don't score marks which is greater than 50, then our system will just give or completely skip this block of code of if and give the output that sorry, take exam again. So this is how we define nested if else in Java. Now the next topic we have to cover is the if else if ladder. Now when we have multiple conditions and each with their corresponding statement, then we can perform the or design our program using the if else if ladder. So let's say we have different conditions like condition 1, condition 2, condition 3, condition 4, and each with their respective statement. Let's say statement 1, statement 2, statement 3 and statement 4, such that if condition 1 is true, then only statement 1 will be executed. If only condition 2 is true, then only statement 2 will be executed. If condition 3 is true, then only statement 3 will be executed. And similarly, if the condition 4 is true, then statement 4 only will be executed. So the general syntax of using the if else if ladder is first we write the if condition followed by the first condition and its corresponding statement, followed by the else if keyword. Notice here we are using else if instead of else if, and afterward the second condition and its corresponding statement. Afterward we will use the third condition within the else if, and in the end we will use the else statement when we will be completely exhausted by the condition and no condition left, or it will be the last output if no condition is true. So to understand this, let's look at a problem statement. Suppose we have to design a program which takes marks of the student and returns the grade according to marks obtained, and the conditions are that if the marks is greater than 90 and less than 100, then give a grade. If the marks is greater than 80 and less than 90, then give a B grade. If marks is greater than 70 but less than 80, then give a C grade. And if the marks is greater than 50 but less than 70, then give U passed. But if the marks is less than 50, then we have to give that sorry take exam again. So we defined these four conditions, and if none of these conditions are true, that the marks scored is less than 50, then our program will just give that sorry take exam again. So this condition will be defined within else clause. These three conditions will be defined within a else if clause, and this condition, that is the first condition, will be defined in a if clause. So let's head over to Eclipse and see how can we perform. So to perform this operation or design this program, we first have to define a variable called marks in which our values are going to be stored. Followed by we have to define the conditions. So we will write that if followed by the condition within the parenthesis, that is marks is greater than 90, and for using the AND operation we will use the ampersand sign, followed by marks is less than 100. Then what we will do is system dot out dot println congrats a grade, and we will terminate our statement with the semicolon sign and we will close our braces. So now we have defined our first line, and we will copy this because our next conditions will be similar in nature. So after it we will use the else if clause to define the other conditions as well. So our other condition is that if the marks scored is greater than 80, that is we have to write 80 but less than 90, then our system will give an output that congrats B grade. And similarly our third condition is that if the marks scored is greater than 80 but less than 70, then our program will give a C grade, and we have to define it in a else if condition. After it we also have another condition that if the marks are greater than 50 but less than 70, then our program will just say that you passed and won't give any grade. And if either of these conditions are not true, that is, if let's say we have neither of these conditions true, then our program will simply print that system dot out dot println sorry take exam again. We have to define it within the curly braces instead of parentheses. So now we have designed our program. Now let's give some values to our marks. So let's say we give it a value of 75. We have to use the assignment operator, and now if we will run this, we'll get an output. Sorry, we have made a mistake. Okay, we have to write 70 here and 80 here, otherwise we will get a logical error. So if we run this again, we will get congrats C grade, because the marks obtained are between 70 and 80, and if the marks obtained are between 70 and 80, the system is getting our output that congrats C grade. Similarly, if we change these marks to, let's say, 45, which is less than 50, then all of these conditions will be skipped and our system should give an output that sorry, take exam again. So if we will run this, we will get sorry, take exam again. So that's how we define the multiple else if ladder using the multiple condition using the else if ladder in Java. In the next session, we are going to discuss the switch statement in Java programming language. Thank you.